I'm very excited to be joined by filmmakers Carl Deal and Tia Lessin to discuss their incredible new documentary, Steal This Story, Please, about Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Tia Lessin is an Oscar-nominated and Emmy-winning documentary director and producer of Trouble the Water, Citizen Coke, and The Janes, who's just phenomenal. And we're going to learn so much about her in this conversation. Carl Deal is also an Oscar-nominated documentary filmmaker and journalist, co-director of Trouble the Water and Citizen Coke, and co-founder of their company Elsewhere Films. I'm so happy to have you both here.
We're so happy
We're
to be here.
Is that an
absolutely
okay introduction? I don't.
beautiful.
Okay. It's hard because you guys are a team. And so I was thinking you each deserve your own bio. You've done some movies together. And then I guess The Janes was Tia.
That was my COVID film. One of us had to take care of our kid, and one of us had to do the work. And so, yes, I made The Janes with the great Emma Pildis, and that was, yeah, another story of resistance.
Yeah. So this movie feels like it couldn't possibly be more timely, more urgent at this particular moment where we feel our democracy in this country backsliding, tremendous media consolidation, corporate takeover. We are fighting wars abroad we shouldn't be fighting. We are really not our best. Did you anticipate that this would be timely? I mean, there's a through line with all of the work you're doing. It's all been important. It's all been about resistance. But for you both, how is this film feeling in the way it's being received and coming out right now?
I mean, I'll start. I guess, I think for me it's been pretty cathartic to have this film in this moment. It's been for me personally a way to kind of get my bearings, to channel my outrage, and to deal with the fear that we all are living through right now. And I think in particular being in the movie theaters, in the festival theaters, connecting with crowds has been, exhilarating. And people have been responsive. Audiences have, been really generous with this film. And I think they leave the theater pretty engaged, and it always is really uplifting for me. I think we need that right now. I think community is how we make it through this time. And there's nothing like the community of being with a bunch of strangers in the dark, watching a movie and then talking about it and doing something with it. And so I guess it's been the way that I think for me personally, I'm going to be able to get through this time is on the coattails of Amy Goodman.
And you know what? The activity that we do, the activity that you do is the thing that gets us through day to day, right? Is we get to engage in meaningful ways, hopefully with the world and in a way that resonates with others. And along the way, you create relationships with people. It's just great to make art, but then we're also making a form of journalism at the same time. What's really exciting about this moment is as awful as these times are, um, our screenings are invigorating. I mean, it's like going to a No Kings rally. I was thinking when we were out there on Saturday, it's like going to a No Kings rally in a dark room, but with like really, really great sound. And people who go to movies, one of the reasons we like doing what we do and that we're committed to it is, and that we always, if it merits it, we want to push through the theaters is people who go to movies are active people. It's not easy to go to a movie theater, and especially when you have so many options, right here on the palm of your hand. But people who go online, who find a movie, buy a ticket, they go, they're people who do shit, and they're people who engage. And so our experience just being on the festival circuit, we're about to release theatrically, but being on the festival circuit is you're around people who are ready to do something, and it's really exciting. And so it's a light for us in this awful time. Not to mention the subject matter is very inspiring as well.
It
Well,
is so inspiring. Yeah.
I mean, I would say this is what we're saying in this moment. I don't do a lot of social media. I'm not that public a person. This is the way I'm speaking in this moment. And I had the same feeling when we were releasing The Janes in 2022. We made the film long before Roe v. Wade was overturned. We released it. We went to Sundance that January, and then the leak happened of the Supreme Court decision in May. And we had this film that spoke exactly to that moment, a film about, people who were dealing with, being criminals, giving abortions to women in need in the 60s. And so when we released it, it was right before the Dobbs decision came down, and we were on the road with it. And it was a way to talk about that moment. And it was a big relief for me, and a contribution I felt like I was making.
Huge contribution. Both of you have consistently made these huge contributions with your films, whether they're documentaries about Katrina survivors, the underground abortion network known as Jane, or Dark Money in politics. So I don't know how you refer to yourselves, whether as documentary filmmakers or journalists or both, but this time with Amy Goodman, you're turning your camera on a fellow journalist, I would say. I wonder how you look at it and whether there were new challenges because it was journalist with journalists.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I thought about going to law school when I was a little bit younger, but I kinda weighed, law school versus journalism, and this is gonna be an awful thing to say, but, the rules of evidence are much easier in journalism than in law school, and it just feels like you can get more done a lot faster, right? But we both came by our own roots into documentary filmmaking, but it kind of is the place where journalism and art intersect, and we get the chance to explore not only factual truths but emotional truths and look for those, which creates a different kind of experience for whoever's consuming what you're giving to them. And so I don't know that we consider ourselves either. I like filmmaker.
Okay,
I
but
don't
I'm
know
going to
about you,
out
Tia.
Carl. I'm going to out Carl
No,
because
no, no,
he
no.
he went to journalism school.
Yeah.
So he has the credentials of a real journalist. I just, play one every now and then. He also, I will out him in even a bigger way. I rescued him. He was working for a while for ABC and WTN, Worldwide Television News, and APTV, and he even had a stint at Fox News. So he came into documentary filmmaking, I think, from the dark side, coming out of broadcast journalism, and he hasn't looked back, I think. But yeah,
In my defense, I didn't know what Fox was, and I had to pay the bills, and I went in there, and I lasted barely a week, and one day I walked out. I was doing overnights. I walked out in the morning. Matt Drudge was sitting in the newsroom talking to Paula Jones, right, who was the Clinton whistleblower, and I
Oh, yeah.
walked out, and Rupert Murdoch was coming through the revolving doors, and I had just left Roger Ailes in the newsroom, and everything. I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, so everything clicked, and I never walked back in that door.
Yeah. Well, you captured everything about Amy Goodman. I mean, where she came from, how she founded Democracy Now!, how it grew, what other journalists we're all familiar with, like Jeremy Scahill, who learned by working with her, traveling with her. I wonder how you developed trust with her or got to that level of access with her.
We've known Amy for a really long time. We've been guests on her show with both Trouble the Water and Citizen Coke, and me with the Janes. But long before that, we'd been crossing paths with her and her crews um, in Baghdad in 2003, in the weeks leading up to the Iraq War, um, at the World Trade Organization protests in 1999 in Seattle. And we were at the 2008 protests at the RNC that you see in the film. But I had actually worked with her in 2000. She knew that I had long worked for Michael Moore on his TV show. I was one of the producers, and recruited me to come down to Philadelphia in 2000, where the Republican National Convention was happening. And so I actually just I volunteered for the weekend and followed her around with a camera. And we got to know each other a little better then. And, I got to see everything I needed to know about Amy in that time. She was unstoppable. And she, was equally facile interviewing protesters or politicians and billionaires and billionaire politicians. So, it was kind of fun and a change of pace, because usually I was following Michael Moore with the camera. So this was a journalist, um, doing a very quick turnaround news cycle, not a, long form film. So I think she knew us. I think she certainly knew us through our work, our films, and she respected us. And, all that said, it is a constant relationship building process when you're making a film about people. Who wants the camera to be turned on yourself? It's not easy. And particularly for someone like Amy, what she does is she turns the camera on other people. That is her job. That is her hobby, and so I think she was deeply uncomfortable with having the camera turned on her. And at every chance, she got and continues even, to this day at every Q&A, at every interview, she is very stubborn about, not talking about herself. So we respected her boundaries, but at the same time, we really pushed because we wanted to be a portrait of the work she did, but also of this person. How
Mhm.
did she get to be the person that she is, and how does she sustain that practice?
Yeah. And how do we clone her and have many, many more versions of her? I mean, I think your film is inspiring that way, but it is, we need more of her, more people like her, more democracy now out there. Yeah.
Hear, hear. And what's nice of you to say that. I mean, that is something that a film can do. We can't clone people. We're not scientists, but we can hold up an example and show people that there are different ways of doing things that maybe they hadn't thought of or hadn't imagined yet.
Yeah.
And it helps us all achieve what we might want to achieve, collectively, make the world be what we want it to be. And yeah, Amy Goodman is a great example. For that matter, Tia Lesson's a great example. Like Tia
See you
started to say,
lesson.
Tia and Michael rescued me from my commercial news ghetto, and they showed me a different way, and there was no turning back after they brought me into Bowling for Columbine, and we just locked arms and moved forward. And it's always Michael always says about Tia, who collaborated on so much work with him over the years. When the tunnels are closed and the tanks are coming down the West Side Highway, the person that he wants to be, in the Humvee with is Tia Lesson, because she's gonna know what to do and she's gonna have your back and she's gonna solve the problems that are coming down the pike. He hasn't said that for a few years because I think the landscape has changed a little bit in terms of what we're all facing. But yeah, for a filmmaker, it's personalities that really can motivate. It can focusing stories on people, on a real
Yeah.
people who are doing real things. Is you do that too really well. When you get access, you had incredible access to
Yeah.
an incredible leader. But once you have the access, what do you do?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to mess it up, right?
Yeah, and actually, yeah, they're a little bit similar. I mean, as Tia said, you feel Amy's got her boundaries, but you both have given us tremendous insight into who she is, how she got there, how devoted she is, why she's so devoted, disciplined, no frills, no nonsense. I mean, for example, I love this story, and I now, since watching her film, tell this story, which you probably can tell better than me, but of her family newspaper. Maybe can you share the family newspaper story that she shares in your film? Because it's so good. It's so good.
Carl, you want to do that?
Well, yes. I mean, her first forays into journalism was as the collections agent for her 8-year-old brother's family newspaper, which would have made her, 10 or something like that. But she tells the story of how important the values in her family, the Jewish values of asking a lot of questions, of not taking anything for granted, of, seeking answers and knowledge through conversation. And that in this family newspaper, they would wrestle with big issues of the day and they would even argue and they would fight about it. The grandfather and the great aunts and the kids. And it was just a way of engaging. And so from a very young age for her, the whole idea of engaging in dialogue and journalism was a big part of understanding your place in the world. I mean, we want to understand the world better, but when you're telling a story, you want to understand how they found their place in the world. And Tia
Exactly.
shared a lot of her sort of family background, with having the 1938 wasn't that 1940 wasn't that long ago in our lifetimes.
Yeah. Oh, well, because you go back to her family. I mean, you have her Orthodox Jewish rabbi,
Grandfather.
grandfather,
Yep,
right?
yep,
And so and you go to Europe with her, right? Eastern Europe. Yeah.
that's right. No, she is grounded in her, journalism through her Jewish upbringing, and she let us in on that. And, it's not that secret. She talks about it. It is, part of what makes her who she is and
Mhm.
makes her committed to asking the hard questions and not giving up and engaging in, conversation and welcoming um diverse viewpoints. I think it's also part of, her humor. We learned a little bit about,
Yeah.
a lighter side to Amy, which really actually kind of surprised us, because she has such a serious persona, on the air. And she's kind of a goofball. She's very corny. She tells jokes. She's got incredible timing, as you'll see in the film, um, comedic timing. And she's, you know, while she may not have, you know, we pushed and, a lot of her days and nights are spent working, right? So we really see her personal side or her emotionality, through the footage shot of her over the years. Footage we shot, footage other filmmakers shot, footage, her own crews captured. I'm thinking about like in the days leading up to the Iraq War, she's in her seat, like rocking back and forth with, two cell phones on either ear, one of the, those big cell phones, because it was 2003. And she looks like she's reliving, trauma. At the press conference after, in the years after the massacre in East Timor that she witnessed, her look of dejection when she's being ignored by the White House spokesperson. This is an incredibly important and meaningful thing, and he's just taking her like a joke.
Mhm.
And then, like, yes, with her 106-year-old grandmother, she's just playful as could be. She's
Yeah.
lovely, she's beautiful. So we learned a lot about her through watching her in this footage over the years, and we sort of tried together with our editor Mona Davis to grab those moments, those really beautiful, profound moments, the expressions in her eyes and on her face, and the way that she relates to other people, whether family
Yeah.
members or friends or the people that she mentored over the years.
I was a little worried about her when you show her really after September 11th. Her office was down there, and she stayed at work, like, nonstop when everyone else was evacuated, and the smoke and the ash and everything was coming in, and then later we see she has a cough. I mean, years later. I think she's fearless, and she stays with it, and she's in harm's way, and I wondered, was that compromising for her health? I mean, I'm sure there's also the trauma of what she's witnessed, but I wondered because those are kind of gripping scenes when she's got the team and they're not leaving the building and they're staying with the story.
Yeah. I mean, all we can say about that is that she has a cough, a persistent cough to this day. And, you see it in the film, and she shows us her cough button under the table in her studio where when she has to cough, she presses the button. And, she tells us, I mean, she doesn't explicitly connect them, but, we do know that her cough started when she got a gust of dust come into her studio in the days after 9/11.
Well, and she stayed there.
And we know that more people have been afflicted and have lost their lives to diseases related to the contamination in Lower Manhattan than died in the actual attack. Go ahead, Tia. Sorry.
Well, yeah, and she and her team stayed in they were in a firehouse at, the DCTV
That's it.
studios. The firehouse
Yeah.
turned into a community media center. That's where Democracy Now! Studios were in 2001 in September, and rather than leave and take the risk of not being permitted back into the ground zero site, because they were just a few blocks away from the Trade Center, they stayed. They slept there day in and day out for a couple weeks, and so she was constantly exposed to this, she and her team,
Yeah.
and probably part of the reason why they broke that story, that her co-host Juan Gonzalez, who was at that time a reporter for the Daily News, he was one of the only, investigative journalists in New York City that was actually following the story of the contamination and the toxins that were released, at ground zero, and the impact that had not only on the first responders, the fire people and the police, the EMTs, but also on people sent back to work in the days and weeks after 9/11. So they were among those exposed, and most of the New York media, most just ignored the story. They accepted the Giuliani line at, face value, and Christine Todd Whitman at the EPA said there's nothing to be worried about. It's all fine. It's just dust. And we know now, as Carl said, it's claimed a lot of lives and people have long-term illnesses. But they were there, they were experiencing that, they were exposed to that, and I think they understood something was really wrong. And so thanks
Yeah.
to their reporting, maybe they saved some lives by warning people about the dangers downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the guiding, I think, idea, I mean, there are many themes and ideas in this movie, and in the work that Amy does, but is that when the press surrenders to power, when all of these mainstream news outlets are not actually reporting facts and truth, democracy suffers.
Carl has a lot to say about this too, but I would say that there are a lot of journalists out there asking hard questions. The problem is that they don't have the independence that Amy does. Amy has created this extraordinary model and she's accountable to her listeners. That is where she gets the funding for her show. But other journalists, who work for the commercial media, or if you call it the corporate media, they have gatekeepers, and their gatekeepers, their editors are accountable to CEOs and CFOs who are making money not on the news, not on the news organization side of the business, but they're making money on other parts of the business. And so those, as we've seen in the past year, time and time again, ABC, CBS, broadcast networks are just capitulating because the owners of those networks, the Paramounts, the Time Warners, they're interested in something else, and they're interested in profits. So I do think that there are a lot of really good journalists out there, but they're being muzzled. Many of them are leaving their jobs. They're resigning from, the LA Times. They've been fired from the Washington Post. They're turning to independent outlets. They're turning to Substack. They're turning to ways to get, their reporting out there. In some ways, Amy's has pioneered that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we relate very, very, very deeply to that. I mean, not only have we been involved in various ways in the independent media movement for decades ourselves, but we're independent documentary filmmakers and we always have been. And we haven't always made choices based on the long-term security and college tuition of our son, for example. Right. And so, and we've tried really hard not to capitulate in certain cases, sometimes to our detriment. We had a film accepted to Sundance and, we lost $150,000 in finishing funds in 2 seconds because we stubbornly refused to change the name of the film and take David Koch's name out of the name of the film. And he was a big funder of a public funding entity. So boom, that was gone. Was that a good move or not? It was the right thing to do, but we paid that price for a long time as a result of that. So we're used to it. We're used to being a little bit, as much as we've enjoyed success, we've also maybe suffered because of our stubbornness and unwillingness to compromise for better, for worse. So we have that in common with Amy, and we're also used to doing it ourselves. Michael Moore, also a great example of somebody who, works in a different scale in a lot of ways, but always does what he wants to do. And we trained with him for years, and we worked with him, collaborated for years, and produced several of his films. And, so that's just how we do things. So when November 2024, all of a sudden everybody started freaking out. And then all of a sudden everybody was talking about media consolidation. Well, we've all been watching it happen, like a frog in a pot of boiling water since 1996,
Well, and Amy has named it.
Yeah.
Amy has named it for 30 years. She has been sounding the alarm about the, consolidation of corporate media. And we've all been like, yeah, really? I mean, come on. But in fact, we're seeing what that looks like, what,
Yeah.
the damage that has done, and
Mhm.
the ways, that so many of these owners are muzzling their coverage in order to suck up or kiss up to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Amazon, you know,
Yeah.
um, commissioning a documentary about Melania, which is really just a commercial. It's a promo piece
Yeah.
for the Trump administration, and worse than that, it's a $35 million bribe.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it's unconscionable. That
Mhm.
and that's just the least of it. I mean, we're just seeing it,
Yeah.
again and again. ABC paying $15 million to the Trump administration for a case they would have won.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's front of mind for people, but it's not new, but it's egregious. And,
Yep.
now we have a lawless, unqualified, impulsive, and greedy, corrupt leader who makes no bones about what he's doing and doesn't
Yep.
realize or doesn't care,
Right.
about decorum and the law. And so
Right.
now it's front of mind for a lot of people. And so just back to our film, to this film, Seal This Story, which we're taking out now, theatrically, and
Yeah.
and we're feeling that from the audiences. We're feeling that as we're seeding the bed to release this film, that
Yeah.
there's a hunger for this and people are ready to hear it, and
Yep.
people are and there is an appetite for political content, contrary
Yeah.
to what the conventional wisdom tells you, contrary
Right.
to what the streamers will tell you, contrary to what the networks will tell you. It's out there.
Yeah.
Well,
So we wanna prove people wrong.
there's an appetite on part of the audience. It doesn't look like there's an
Yeah.
appetite on the part of executives who don't want to piss off power because
Right.
they will pay the price.
Right. And power wants them as its mouthpiece. I mean, that's the first step in the authoritarian playbook is to control the media and to just have them promote you and never hold you accountable. I mean, the lack of accountability of our government for anything that they're doing or saying is outrageous. Steal This Story, Please is a great title, and it's Amy Goodman's words in your film. How did you land on it as a title? What do you want it to convey?
Well, you've had those moments as a filmmaker where something just feels right, where it and you don't have to think about it much. And when T and I first heard Amy utter that phrase, we looked at each other and said, "Well, that's what we're going to call the film." Of course, we agonized over it. We tried a dozen other titles along the way, but we landed on that one. For your audience, Steal This Story, Please is a way that Amy talks about this idea of trickle up journalism. She calls it trickle up journalism. So a lot of times, with Democracy Now!, what Amy Goodman does and has been doing for 30 years, this is their 30th anniversary year, is keep creating space for people who are normally pushed to the margins to be able to talk about their experiences, people who are experts in their own lives. So instead of going to a studio when you're covering a protest and having an expert interpret what your reporters are out there seeing firsthand, it's talking to the people on the ground. And she does it globally. Um, she makes news quite a bit and she breaks stories. And their mantra is they're happy to make room with it for the mainstream media to follow. So it's Steal This Story, Please. Now, I do want to say that doesn't mean steal this movie, okay?
Yeah,
Maybe one
great.
day it will, but we're on a slow burn, as you know,
Yeah.
for independent films.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not in it for the money, but we're in it for the audience.
Yeah.
And if people stole it now, we might not be able to build the audience that we need. But, check back with us in 6 months or so.
Yes. I think it's proliferate this story. It's share this story and learn from this story, be inspired by this story.
Sure.
It is so inspiring. I mean, Maria Reis's book gets a little depressing, the number of times that she's facing jail. I mean, she's just once Duterte's in power and he wants her gone, she's just constantly under threat. And I think with Amy Goodman, at least right now, even facing trauma and putting herself on the front lines in dangerous positions and maybe endangering her health a little bit for the sake of the story and for all of us in having truth out there, you feel there's hope. I mean, she's got a sense of humor, but it's also really inspiring. It does make you think like, why aren't I starting something like this? We should all be doing this.
Can I just about the hope part of it, especially
Yeah.
because that's, the part of the title of your conversations. I think behind Amy's hope is this belief in the power of journalism to make change. That is what feeds her hope. I mean, in part. And in terms of seeing that change, I mean, she's seen it in very particular ways, in very specific ways throughout her career, whether it was East Timor. She witnessed the massacre of hundreds, I think 280 East Timorese protesters. She and her colleague Alan Aaron survived. And their reporting on that massacre in 1991 made it impossible for the US media to ignore the story. They had ignored the story of the genocide in East Timor for, I don't know, nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
And it also helped to galvanize this movement that, ultimately led to the independence of the Timorese. We saw, she was there covering the coup in Haiti, a lot like what we saw in Venezuela when the president of Haiti, the lawfully elected president of Haiti, was abducted by the U.S. Marines in 1994 and then again in 2004 and taken to the Central African Republic. And Amy was the only person who was broadcasting President Aristide, who was describing his abduction as a kidnapping. The U.S. press was describing it as what? A resignation, a regime change. And so she broke that story. But what was important for her was not breaking the story. It was that the rest of the media paid attention, and it changed the way that narrative was told. So just to say a bit more about Steal the Story, I think what Amy has said is having an exclusive is actually a failure in her mind. Seeing it get out into the world, that's the success.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, being creative, making art, and telling the truth as a journalist, there are all these things suddenly that have, since 2025, without saying his name, have become radical threatening acts, right? They're threatening to the power structure and they're under attack. They're taking art out of museums, they're taking facts out of libraries and out of schools. They're rewriting everything. And so, with Fall of Freedom, it's a call for people to be creative in their own ways, to people to continue to make art and to celebrate it and to use art as a form of resistance. And this May 1st is going to be their second round of an official Fall of Freedom Day, although people are encouraged to make art, any kind of art, no matter what, and in thousands of places across the country, whether in galleries or in movie theaters with our film. People are going to be, putting their foot down, raising their voices in resistance to the oppressive, the attacks on our really precious institutions in the art world and in the world of media, because they're all connected in a way.
Yeah.
We're fortunate because we'll be on, a couple dozen screens most likely, on that day. We'll be in the middle of our theatrical release. Who knows how many screens? Let's keep our fingers crossed. And so, we're acknowledging that at that time, we're gonna be out there and calling for people to make more art and to raise their voices up in whatever ways they can.
I love it. And
I wanted to say one more thing about
yeah,
Fall of Freedom, if
yeah.
I might, because I think what they count on from us right now is silence. I mean, that's what will keep this regime going. Is our
Mhm.
silence, our complicity. And so to the degree that we use our voices, we use our art, we use our cultural institutions to come together to speak. It is our individual artists, it's theaters, it's museums, it's libraries, it's filmmakers, it's theater producers. It's just a whole range of of artists saying we will not be silent. And I think, that is how actually we end the film. Amy ends the film, um, our film, with that call to action. And so it's profound and simple, and we will not be silent.
We will not be silent. Yes. Do you want to talk a little more about the filmmaking?
One of the things that media can do and that films can do is bringing people together for a common purpose, whether they know that's why they're coming together or not. And it's one of the highest callings, I think, of what all of us do, but in particular journalists. That's and journalists, no matter if they're working for the commercial media, which is fine, or someplace else or independently, we have an idea that we're out here for the greater good.
Yeah.
And that is to be encouraged all the time. And so, when I hear Amy Goodman say things like, I believe journalism can be the greatest force for good that the world has ever seen, or that journalism is the lifeblood of a democracy, those things, they really mean something to her. And so, as a filmmaker, in making the film, I learned how profound those are because I saw her put those ideas and those goals into practice every single day. Those are the guiding principles, and you never forget why it is that you're doing what you're doing, and to be guided by your values. And they can be simple, they can be ridiculed by people, which they often are, not those in particular, but there was a time in our lifetimes, when protesters were ridiculed and kept off of TV at all costs for what, and often by decree from, a cadre of network executives. That's
Yeah.
changed a little bit when Trump's been in, but those are very real and laudable goals, I think, that are part of the practice, Amy's practice, and a lot of other independent journalists practice, is to listen to what people have to say, and we can all be better from that. And so that's one of the joys of making independent films is learning, finding meaning in what you do by watching what other people do. Of course, we had final cut on the film, and she's not a producer. It's not an Amy Goodman film. It's not a Democracy Now! Film, but very cooperative and turned over their archives for us, which was great. But, the content of the film is all our responsibility, and it's our story that we told. It's our interpretation, and other than making sure that we were being accurate a few times, we didn't engage with her, but we did show her the film when it was done. And we showed her the cut that was unfinished, that was locked but not finished. So it had all the temporary graphics in it and everything. And Amy is an incredible copy editor because she does it every day, all day long. And she just took us to task. She ripped it apart. She found grammatical errors, she found spelling errors, she found dates that were wrong. And so she saved us having to fact check it ourselves, at
Oh,
least on that
no,
part
we
of it.
still fact checked it. Come on.
I'm just
Does.
talking about all that stuff.
Well, she still does that even in our release. She'll see something on the IFC Center website that is incorrect, and she's the first person to find it. It's amazing that from soup to nuts, she deals with the details and the big picture. And I guess that's kind of what we do as filmmakers. It is a group sport, but we also, we're involved. We have our hands in everything.
Yeah.
And speaking of group sport, I just wanted to give a shout out to our incredible editor Mona Davis, who had the daunting task of going through I don't know, hundreds of hours of footage, from independent filmmakers, other news crews, from Amy's own outtakes, video recordings, field recordings, whole movies. It was an extraordinary assortment of materials, and we had to look at every bit of it. And Mona, was patient and meticulous, and really considered in her approach. And she's a verite editor. A lot of and we love the fact that, even though we're talking a lot about the politics of the film and Amy's beliefs, we're using a lot of words, but it's a very visual film. I think it's really anchored in the verite material. We do have interviews cut together, but we're hoping that those interviews are more about personality and giving you a sense of character development rather than, just relaying information. If you want, to watch a film and feel the emotion, this is what we try to do. So we also relied on this extraordinary musician by the name of Zoe Keating. She's a cellist. She's a musician, and she does film scores and TV scores, and she is a looping artist. She makes one cello her sound like a full orchestra.
Wow.
And she makes this cello like, it creates this intimacy. It takes us on the inside. It also gives us this epic nature of the task at hand.
In watching your film, I was commenting on that because the score, it really works and the way that you chose to weave the intimate personal story of Amy together with these big geopolitical moments and these big domestic American moments in for news reporting is powerful because you feel this emotion, you feel connected to her, and you want to see her succeed. Again, I just want to see more examples of her, more independent media, more democracy now. It's everywhere. We need her. We need you all. We need this film right now.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Vanessa. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
having the
you.
time to talk to you about this. You know,
Yep,
you locked in a room with a handful of people for 2 years figuring it out, and then we appreciate anybody who wants to talk about it. So
great. Well, I'm
And you know
thrilled.
what?
I'm honored to meet you.
And help
Yeah,
us see the film in a different way. Like, we were in the very beginning of these conversations about the film. We've done very little press on the festival circuit.
yeah,
And so we love this is a really fun part because people are taking what we did and doing something with it. And we're learning about what we did through other people's eyes. So thank you for sharing your thoughts about it and helping us see the film in a different way.
yeah. I'm going to keep talking about it nonstop to everybody I meet to make sure everyone sees this movie.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
Vanessa. Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah,
much. Follow Freedom is one example of the many, and you know this well because you're doing this and you've done this in the past, where you trying to use the film in concert with organizations and individuals who are doing really important work, like Follow
yeah,
Freedom. And in our focus right now, especially, is First Amendment, is press, is is reporting. It's the attacks on the media, the attacks on the press, the attacks on journalists, and the
yep,
attacks on the funding. So a big part of our rollout of this film is focused on collaborating with community media and independent media groups in every city. Right now we have them in
right.
well in dozens of cities so far where we have these partnerships in place. So we can use the film as a gift for them to help raise awareness and to try and close some of the funding gap
Yeah,
that they're facing with all these attacks, and some of it's public money, some of it's private money, because it's a really hostile environment
yeah,
for independent media. So independent media partnerships are really central to the rollout of this project and hopefully to the life of it because it's really at the core of what we're talking about in the film. It's at the core of what Amy does, and it's what she's committed her life to doing. And so it's another way of maybe trying to play it forward, the ideas and the inspiration that we can get from her in really concrete ways.
yeah.
So, yeah, wanted to share that.
Thrilled that that's the case, and that you've got Jane Fonda with her Committee for the First Amendment, and you've got Tom Morello and Rosario Dawson. Very good people, very good values joining forces and helping make this a phenomenon. Because maybe we can do something to turn it around in our country for independent media.
We all
That
have
would
to
be
do our
great.
part.
Yeah,
You know, let's hope.
yeah, yep.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Thank you.